Hello. This video will describe how to create a full animation take within After Effects. So we're going to first start off by talking about what is an animation take. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new composition. And we're going to call this one Take 1. Alright, and let's just do a 3-second animation for now. It'll be fine. Alright, so I'm going to create some text up here. I'll crank up 55, that'll be fine. Animation take. Okay. Alright, so this is going to be kind of our take order, things to think about. Okay, so underneath that, I'm going to create another one, and we're going to call this, we're going to talk about the different parts of a take. So this is in reference to some of the major principles of animation. Too many. Anticipation is going to be the first one, so let's back out and move this down so we can see this. Alright, so part of an animation take, we need several different aspects for it to look believable and natural. The first one is going to be anticipation. Follow through is the next one. We'll come back and we'll describe each one of these. Overlapping action and secondary action. Now there are a lot of other aspects of animation that we can also talk about that we'll get to during this animation that are necessary to make things believable and appealing and interesting. But to create an animation take, we overall need these four major things, or at least consider how these four major areas of motion can be created to develop an engaging, interesting action. So a take is simply an overall action. That's an idea of jumping, throwing a baseball, spinning around, smiling, talking, whatever the major action is, the major purpose of this motion. That's what we call the take. So if we're going to do a jump animation, the jump itself is the take. Now underneath that is where we would develop the subparts of the motion in order to build the believability and appeal of that overall jump action. So the anticipation is the opposite of the jump. So if it's doing a jump, then that would be the down position, squashing down to jump up. The follow through would be the execution of that jump. Overlapping action is the blending of motion, the continual motion of objects as that action is being terminated, that jump is being followed through. And then secondary action is a result of the primary action. So because I jumped, what happens because I jumped? I'm going to have a settle, I'm going to have a squash back down, back to a normal position, or I'm going to jump and fall, or I'm going to jump and land on my hands, or I'm going to jump and hit another object. What is the result of the jump? What happens after that? What happens to the primary object, and then what happens to anything else that's in the scene? So that's an overall take. Anticipation happens in the opposite direction of the follow-through. Then the follow-through is a termination of that action. Overlapping action is the blended motion and continual motion throughout that follow-through. And then secondary action is a result of the follow-through, result of the primary action. So we have primary action, we have secondary action, and then before the primary action, we also have anticipation. So we'll leave that up there just as a review for a bounce. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an animation that follows and incorporates all four of those major areas. We have a previously created ball composition, which is the ball graphic, and a previously created cube composition, which is the cube graphic. So we're going to have an action or a take that the ball and the cube interact and animate with each other. They're going to hit each other, touch each other, and do something so that we have interaction between the two objects. Alright, so in my composition, I have a couple layers for my text. I'm going to leave those alone. But in my composition, I'm going to drag in my cube to the layers panel, and I'm going to drag in my ball to the layers panel. Oh, I missed ball. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to move them down so they look like they would be on a ground surface. My ball Potentially doesn't need to be that big, but that would be kind of neat if it was that big. Maybe we'll scale it just a little bit. Yeah, we'll leave it that big actually. We'll leave it there. All right, so my cube, I'm going to put it over here. Let's actually just move it down so it's touching the ground surface. Same position the ball is, but I'm going to move it to the left. All right. We could also come in here and create another ground surface. Kind of down here. Actually, let's come back. Let's make sure. We could do this, but we don't have to. I guess we won't do it right now. It's fine. We don't need to. But we could create another layer that we are setting up for. This will be our ground surface, right? So that's a good way to kind of make sure we always have a consistent place where the objects are touching. We call this one BG. Whoops. Then we'll move that underneath the cube and the ball. There we go. And we can also lock that layer. There's a lock button. We'll also lock the text layers in case we don't want to adjust them. There you go. So now there's no way for me to adjust any of that. Move those around. You can just adjust the cube and the ball. So we'll kind of move it up some. All right. So actually what we want to create is a cube that is jumping up, maybe touching the ball, like brushing up against the ball. The ball might react a little bit, and then the cube jumps over. Maybe we'll do a couple other things. All right, so first thing we need to do is our ball's gonna stay stationary and not move until our cube touches it. But the cube is going to anticipate the action. It's gonna jump up in the air, touch the ball, jump over it, and land down and settle down. So that's gonna be the primary action of the cube jumping. And secondary action is gonna be what the ball does because of the cube. All right, so with the cube, we're going to open up our transforms. And we need some time to squash and stretch, so we're going to also give it a couple of frames for them to understand what we're doing. So maybe 10 frames in, I'm going to start my keyframing for my position. So let's turn on the stopwatch for a position. Okay, so we're going to allow 10 frames for the audience to understand where they're at, and then we're going to start our action here. So maybe we'll do 3/4 of a second, something like that, of a squash. So I'm going to first do the position, then we'll come back and do the squash. So during this squash, my position is not going to change. One thing I want to do first is actually move my anchor point to the bottom of my cube because I am going to squash and stretch here. So move our anchor point to the bottom of the cube. I'm just dragging on the second Y value for anchor point. And then the position, I just need to move it down. So it's touching the ground surface again. Here we go. All right, so maybe at 1 second mark, we're going to keyframe the position again. And I can do that by coming over here and clicking on the diamond to the left of the position. So that basically says I'm not going to change the position here. Let's move forward some, and we will jump over the ball. So maybe half a second. We're going to take the cube and put it above the ball. There you go. And I'm just keyframing the position. Another half second at 2 seconds in, I'm going to put the cube all the way over here. Move it down so it's positioned. That looks pretty even. All right, and then I want to kind of hit settle. So we'll do maybe a half second settle, something like that. And we will keyframe the position again. So the last keyframe is not changing anything, but that's going to be for the squash and stretch settle back down. So if I play, I have a bounce, but it's clipping through the sphere, so I need to adjust for kind of rotate in position, but also kind of want it to kind of clip and hit the ball so it moves the ball. All right. So let's do squash and stretch next. So 10 frames in, I'm going to checkbox the stopwatch for scale. Let me uncheck the constrain proportions button. This is going to be a pretty long anticipation. So this first part's anticipation. We want the cube to anticipate the jump, so we're going to squash down and scale out. Okay. There we go. So I might make sure it's moved down a little more as well because of the anchor point position. Yeah, I might just undo that for now. Yeah, we'll leave that. We'll come back and adjust that in a little while. There you go. So that squashes down. And then from a ball bounce tutorial, you can watch my previous video for ball bounce. We want it to stretch out right after that. So let's do the opposite. So we're going to stretch, but scale it in horizontally. There you go. So it's going to squash down, longer anticipation, faster stretch. Up at the top, it's going to be back to a perfect square. So let's put our scale back to 100 and 100. There you go. And then it's going to come down the opposite side 1 frame before it touches the ground. And it's going to stretch out again. There you go. Scale it in horizontally, scale it out vertically. And then this is the squash point. So that's going to squash out, squash down. And at the very end, it's going to settle. So here's the part of the secondary action where it's going to settle back to a perfect square. There you go. So let's watch it now. Anticipate down, jump up, settle back to position. So what we've already really created is the anticipation and a settle, which is secondary action for the cube. We've also created the follow through, the jump over the ball. So we have a really long anticipation to exaggerate that down position, to give the audience the opportunity to expect what's going to happen. And then we have the follow through, jumping over the ball. And then we have about a half-second settle back into the full cube. So that is the completion of the secondary action for the cube. Now we can just refine some of this so that way it looks a little more believable. As it's stretching out, it might be good to add a little bit of lean, forward lean to it. So let's go 1 frame before that on 1 second in, and we're going to turn the stopwatch on for rotation. And then 1 frame later, we're going to rotate it forward. So it's going to lean into that. Maybe we'll do it like that right there. It's clipping in the ground, so I might want to kind of move it up in the air some. There you go. Then I'll update the position as well. At the top of the arc, we're going to have the rotation back at 0. So we'll change that and it'll update that keyframe there. So basically it's going to lean forward, and at the top of the arc, it's going to be back vertical. And then the second stretch, the down, we want to lean it the opposite direction. So it's going to look like it's kind of jumping in the air. And to do this as well, we'll just kind of move it up a little bit so it's not clipping in the ground. And then it's going to go back flat when it touches the ground. So let's change the rotate back to 0 on that frame. And we're doing it 1 frame to the next. We don't have to worry about it kind of blending in towards the ground. So let's watch that now. Now it looks like the cube is jumping in the air. Like as if it has like a human characteristics. It's anticipating down, leaning forward for the jump, leaning backwards to kind of catch itself, and then squashing down and settling back. So we want it to touch the ball, but possibly not this much. So let's go to the top of the arc and maybe move it up in the air a little bit more. There we go. And I kind of want it to touch it once and then not touch it again. So maybe we'll go in the graph editor, separate our position dimensions. If I right click on position, we're going to choose separate dimensions. And then we'll just select our vertical Y position. Select that middle keyframe, and we'll do ease, ease in, and ease, ease out. Buttons at the bottom right. And we will kind of slow this down even more by pulling the tangents in and out. There you go. We're going to adjust the curve a little bit here as it goes in and out of those. There you go. So that will really slow that cube down at the top. We're going to go to X position, and we're going to smooth out the curves here as well. So actually let's take everything and we'll do ease, ease in, and ease, ease out. Let's try linear to begin with and see what that looks like. There you go. That looks actually a lot better with linear. We really don't really want the horizontal motion to slow down too much. There you go. So linear tangent for all these keyframes actually works out better for the horizontal X position. So we have kind of slowed down the top for gravity. It no longer touches the ball anymore. So maybe we'll kind of make our adjustments here. Maybe vertically. Come back and kind of move this down. It's just above. There you go. Now it's starting to touch that ball. Okay. You can also kind of move it over a little bit. Well, let's take this to the middle one. So that maybe it's jumping further over. So it hits to begin with, but then does not hit it later. So maybe this keyframe needs to be over here a little more. And then we'll go match the position. What's the position here? Horizontally it's 1492, so we'll copy. And then we'll paste. Let's actually just paste it this way. So we'll paste position X, position X. And then we'll come over here, position X. There you go. There you go. So it touches the ball to begin with. And it's not going to touch it this way, the second end. There you go. All right, so let's watch it again. So that's just adjusting some of the timing and kind of refining some of the motion so it'll look how we want it to for this next part. So what we've created so far is the primary action of the cube. It is going to anticipate down, that's this first section, and then it's going to follow through with a jump above the ball. It's going to then squash down, and then it's going to settle, which is the overlap in action and into the secondary action. So that finalizes the motion for the cube. Now we want to think about what happens to the ball when the cube hits it. And this is going to be creating secondary action for the ball. Now the cube is touching the ball, hitting it. So it would be natural to have the ball kind of rotate towards the right slightly in reaction to what the cube is doing. So we want to make sure we find the point where the cube touches the ball, so it's really right there as a starting point. And then we're going to go to the ball, open up the transforms for the ball, and we're just going to do a position here. And I'm going to click the stopwatch for a position. And this is the point of contact where the cube hits the ball. And I just want it to kind of slowly rotate. Really kind of, it's going to start the motion fast and then slowly end the motion. So maybe let's do 1 full second of the ball here. A little less than 1 full second. And we're going to take the ball and kind of move it over to the right. Okay. Now I always want to scrub back and forth to make sure that the cube is not going to touch the ball again, which it's not. That looks pretty good there. So I'm just making sure that the cube only touches the ball once. There we go. So I want to touch it and then not touch it again. And then I'm going to come in here and adjust the timing for the ball. Okay, so let's go to the graph editor and then the position. And I'm going to right click and choose separate dimensions again. And the only thing really animated was the position X here. And we're going to adjust the timing and motion of the ball so that it starts fast and ends slow. That means it's going to have a lot of force to begin with, not too much, but a lot of force, and then it's losing that force, so it's going to slow down as it gets closer to the last keyframe. So what we want to do is select those two keyframes and then make sure we do ease, ease in and ease, ease out. And then we're going to select the first keyframe and drag that tangent up because we want that to be a faster motion, so we want the curve to be more vertical. And then it actually is have a slow or ease in to begin with, which means it's going to slow down the motion. The more horizontal the curve is, the slower that motion is. We're going to exaggerate that further. So we're going to take that in tangent for the second keyframe and drag that towards the left more to really slow that down even more. There we go. So now let's watch. There we go. So the ball gets hit pretty fast, and then it starts to slow down even more. There we go. So it's faster to begin with, and it slows down near the end. Now, with that time and adjustment, We may need to go back and make sure the cube isn't clipping the ball again. Or we could adjust the motion again so that the ball maybe on this side gets hit back the opposite direction. That's okay. I think what we'll do is adjust the motion of the cube so the cube isn't going to be touching the ball again. So maybe that means we're going to come back and adjust the final position. Let's get out of the graph editor. Final X position, so it's further outward. So let's see, over here, let's just take it and move it horizontally more. Moving everything, so let's do like 1500. Click off of all of my keyframes. There we go, that should work. There we go, 1592, so we'll copy that, kind of paste that. Let's see, let's actually do this one, copy, paste, and paste there as well. Here we go. Okay, so I want it to hit the ball here, then I don't want it to hit the ball again. Here we go, so it hovers, but it's not hitting it. And then landing down on the ground. There we go, that looks pretty good. So overall here we have a whole animation take. Our primary action is the box bouncing, jumping over the ball. So we have the anticipation of the box squashing down in preparation for the action. And then the follow-throughs, the jump over the ball. And then I have a settle, or the box's secondary action of settling down, squashing down, and then going back to a perfect square, cube again. And then I also have secondary action for the ball. The cube is hitting the ball. So the ball needs to react to that. The ball's moving slightly. And then slowing down at the end. So there's plenty of other things we can do, but we always want to think about what is the overall action. That's what we call the take. And then breaking it down into what's anticipating, what is the follow through, what is the overlap in action, which is the blending of the motion, the continual motion. And then the secondary action, what is the result of the primary action. So you'd also have the box jumping on top of the ball, or the ball jumping on top of the box, or the box hitting the ball and the ball flying across the screen here. But this overall gives a good standpoint of, and I'll let it play a couple more times, of a full animation take. Anticipation, follow through, overlapping action, and secondary action. All right, that'll wrap up this video about how to create an animation take in After Effects.